we want to honor exceptional scientific achievements. So let me most cordially congratulate Professor Kruse to this year's Heinrich Wieland Prize for pioneering targeted protein degradation as a new therapeutic principle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boehringer. The Heinrich Wieland Laureate is selected by an international independent scientific board of trustees. And the chairman of this board is Professor Ulrich Hartl from the Max Planck Institute for Biochemistry in Martinsried. Welcome, Professor Hartl. Why did you choose to award the Heinrich Wieland Prize to Craig Kruse?
Yeah, that was actually a very simple and unanimous decision of the prize jury. Craig Kruse has achieved something that is very rarely achieved by a medical scientist. He invented a new way of making drugs, and not only did he come up with the initial idea, but he also took it all along up to the clinical application, partially actually in companies that he himself has founded. So he's not only an outstanding scientist, but also a very successful entrepreneur. So what he invented is a way to remove protein molecules that are harmful and can cause disease, remove them from our cells in a very precise way, essentially by using drugs that on the one side bind to a particular protein of interest that needs to be removed, and on the other side they grab the cell's own protein shredding machine, the so-called proteasome. So they take the proteasome to the protein target and thereby induce a very efficient removal and very specific removal of disease proteins. This works for cancer therapy and also perhaps for neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease that are all caused by harmful proteins. So it's a really major breakthrough, and Kruse really embodies the qualities that we like to see in a winner of the Heinrich Wieland Prize.
Thanks a lot, Professor Hartl. We heard about Craig Kruse's work, and now we would like to introduce himself and his work with a short video produced in cooperation with Yale University.
I'm Craig Kruse, the John C. Malone Professor of Molecular, Cellular, and Developmental Biology, Chemistry, and Pharmacology at Yale University. I got interested in this field because I was interested in how one could possibly hijack the natural protein degradation machinery inside cells. Each cell has a quality control system that regulates the lifespan of particular proteins. And so this technology, this protein degradation technology that my lab has developed, hijacks this system to be able to degrade problem disease-causing proteins. And so we feel this has an advantage over traditional pharmaceutical approaches that simply stop the function of problem proteins by having a small compound, a small chemical bind to these problem proteins. This protein degradation technology that is developed in my lab offers the ability actually to make the problem proteins go away. So I got interested in this topic because 20 years ago, my lab discovered that there was a natural substance from a microorganism, a very potent anti-tumor agent that acted by blocking the natural cellular machinery involved in recycling proteins. And by blocking this system, problem proteins started to arise and they became toxic, and they were selectively toxic for tumor cells. And so this got me thinking about a chemical approach to modulating this recycling system. And I thought maybe instead of blocking the system, instead of unplugging the garbage disposal, what if we had a way to actually activate it? If we could drag problem proteins to this recycling system and cause these problem proteins to be selectively degraded. And that was the genesis of this controlled protein degradation technology that my lab developed. So 20 years ago, the entire human genome was sequenced, meaning that we know every single gene that makes up a human. The problem is, how do we drug all of these proteins that are encoded by these genes? And what I hope the future of PROTACs holds is that it will open up the creativity amongst drug developers and change what they consider is a possible drug target. We might be able to go after those problem proteins that aren't currently druggable. And so I'm optimistic as well as hopeful that this will have an impact on how drugs are developed. Well, it's a real honor to receive the Heinrich Wieland Prize for 2020. This prize is for my lab's development of a particular technology that's focused on eliminating disease-causing proteins. It's a very innovative approach to drug development, and this prize means a lot to me. When I started off developing this technology, I had always hoped that we might be able to change how drugs are being developed, and this prize means that we're on our way. So thank you very much.
Congratulations to the Heinrich Wieland Prize, Professor Craig Crews. The topic of our meeting is starting up science from lab to therapy. And I'm pleased to have Craig Crews and two more guests to our discussion today. The first one is Professor Andrea Tötenberg, Department Head of Skin and Lymph Node Sonography at the University Medical Center of the Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz and co-founder and CEO of the company ActiTrax. And the second one is Professor Christian Hackenberger, Department Head at the Leibniz Research Institute for Molecular Pharmacology, as well as Professor of Chemical Biology at the Humboldt University in Berlin. And he's founder of the company Tubulis. I would like to welcome you all here in our discussion. And I would like to start with you, Professor Crews, as you're kind of the senior in terms of business experience here on the panel. Can you tell us how many businesses you've got already? I think it's 3 or 4, is it?
3 so far. I'm working on my 4th, but it's been exciting.
Okay, and what are these businesses doing? Why did you found them?
Yeah, so my lab at Yale sort of works at the interface of chemistry and biology, and through the course of our research, we have a mission of trying to expand the knowledge base, but also we see opportunities for application. And I think that starting companies allows for us to be able to now fully exploit those opportunities. And so my first company was a oncology-based company. We developed a drug for a blood tumor called multiple myeloma. My second company, Arvinas, is one that was based on the technology that was the basis of this award. And I should say thank you again to the Stiftung, very much honored by this award. But I think that there's a lot of creativity that can't be fully explored in academia. And so that's why I'm excited about working with the private sector to create new companies.
Okay. Professor Hackenberger, you are kind of the second in the row if you go on a chronological level. You founded Tubulis in 2018, I think, and you just nodded to what Mr. Crews said. What are you doing in this company? Why did you found it?
Yes, I mean, I can echo very much what Craig was referring to before. So pretty much we took some invention which was coming from my laboratory and from our collaboration partners at the Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich, from Heinrich Leonhard's lab, on the modification of antibodies. And our goal was to generate next generation cancer therapeutics. So to make, let's say, chemotherapy more benign for the patient. And the idea is that once you modify an antibody, which would be responsible for recognizing a certain tumor, that once you modified this and loaded this with a bioactive molecule, a toxin, that you would have this specifically targeted to this diseased cancer cell. And pretty much we developed some new technologies to make this whole construct easier to access and also safer and more stable. And I can only say that you can go to a certain level, but then you have to put this out there and evaluate this further. And for us, the only possibility to really demonstrate this also in now further preclinical studies is by founding our company Tubulis. Of course, also by raising the money that we needed to do this all and to really exploit this further, because there's only a certain way of some things that you can do in academia. And then from there on, you are in an application-driven world. And this is something which we then decided to do, and so far it looks pretty good.
Thank you. Professor Tüttenberg, you are just in the process of funding a company. What are you doing there?
We already funded about 3 weeks ago, so it's funded now. And I started. I'm a clinical doctor, and I started when about 20 years ago in the research lab of Helmut Jonoleit, and there we developed the first dendritic cell vaccines for melanoma. And this was my first, my first contact with clinical studies, and I agreed to Professor Hackenberger because we did a lot of trials, but only in the academia, and you cannot go from or it's hard. You have not enough money to make clinical studies in a way that you can have a product afterwards, which is which can be used in the whole world. And so, if you do research in cancer, then you come automatically to the regulatory part of the immune system. And we went the other way around, and we now develop regulatory T cells in order to control hyperreactive immune system of the humans. And this is with a goal, for example, to treat graft-versus-host disease after stem cell transplantation in leukemia. And we produce regulatory T cells in a very efficient way to give them to the patients which suffer from transplant reactions.
Okay, and as it is pretty fresh, you're founding a business, can you still remember that moment where you thought, okay, I have to start my own company? What was that moment?
Yeah, it was kind of, so we are funded from the Federal Ministry of Education and Research. They have a program which is called Go Bio and which helps to go this way from academia to funding a company. And when I started there, I wasn't quite sure if I really want to found a company, but then you go into it and you learn how you can succeed, and that the best way to get your goal is to found a company. And this was about, I think, 2 years ago when I realized that this is the only way to succeed and to bring your cellular product and your medication to the people.
Would you agree, Professor Kruse?
Yeah, I would agree. I believe that those of us in academia, we're looking for impact. We're looking for trying to change our own little world of academia in terms of knowledge base. But there are many of us that are also looking for bigger impact. And that requires additional help that it cannot be found in academia. And so we're living in a very fortunate time now where we have the infrastructure, the ecosystem, if you will, where people value ideas coming from academia and can recognize their potential and are willing to invest in them and are patient to be able to now realize some of these concepts or translate some of these concepts actually into meaningful therapies. And so it's an exciting time.
If you say there are investors that really value the ideas, does it make a difference if you found a business in the US where perhaps investors are more venturesome than in Germany, or doesn't it make a difference? Can you say something to that, or would you like to add something, Professor Hackenberger?
This question is for me?
Yes,
Good.
if you want.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, well, in my opinion, Professor Tüttenberg already referred to this. There are great programs available in Germany that help you to develop your idea further, let's say, towards the application, towards really bringing it to the market. So you just mentioned the Go Bio program. We were funded in the early phase by the Exist program, and also there are several other awards which are then more regional. So these are great programs, and I think that this is really something unique that also Germany offers, that you help pretty much the academics also to develop their ideas further beyond academia. But what I think, and this is also my own experience from bringing this company now after the foundation, one step further is what Craig Cruz was referring to. We really need additional investors who take the risk to then bring this idea forward. And from my own observation, I mean, I know a lot of colleagues also in the US, and I worked and studied there for myself for a long time, that, let's say, in the US, the desire to contribute and the willingness to take this risk, I think, is a little bit higher. So my observation so far was that really this risk capital that people invest in Germany is maybe not that much available. And if there is one gap in Germany, I think it is exactly there, where you have all the great ideas developed by this initial funding phases from Exist, from GoBio, but then to go to the next translational step, because this is also when you need really the big money. I mean, we were very fortunate. Endeavor, we raised 11 million, and we need this now also for the next phase. It sounds like a big number, but it's actually not that much when you think about all the things that we need to do. But this is really something where more emphasis, more effort, and maybe also new incentives from politics are needed.
Professor Tüttenberg is the next one, but before that, I would like to welcome you to join our discussion. Please share your comments, please ask questions. We will add them in the discussion. And now it's your turn, Professor Tüttenberg.
Yeah, I just completely agree, because we're looking for investors the last 1.5 years, and we found some, but it was very funny because we had a due diligence in the business way, in the science way, in the clinical way, and all the people that did this due diligence with us, they came from the US, and it was funny because they didn't understand our problems. For example, also with clinical studies. In the graft versus host disease, we have to start here in Germany at the very end, when there are patients that have no other treatment anymore. And this perhaps will be, this will be good for safety and feasibility studies, but not for the efficacy. And here in Germany, all the investors want to have clinical data for efficacy, but they do not want to have treated the people in an earlier phase, for example. And in the US, with the US guys, they said, okay, you have to treat them for in an earlier way when they do not have developed graft versus host disease. And this is quite also a kind of it's not that logical. You want to have clinical data, but you do not want to invest in the very early phase of your company founding. So this is contradictory in a way, and this is, I think, a very important point. There is not the willing to take so much risk here in Germany, I think.
Would you agree, Professor Cruz? Is it easier to found a business in the US?
That's possibly true. I mean, to start a company, you need 3 ingredients. You need people, you need ideas, and you need capital, money. And I think that certainly Germany has the people and the ideas. But I would say that I have seen things change in Europe for the better in recent years. And I have evidence in that my second company has European investors in it. Now, granted, they're investing in an American company, but they are based in Europe and have placed other investments in Europe as well. And so I'm hopeful and optimistic that things are changing. And I certainly encourage people that are interested in pursuing their entrepreneurism to look both at home as well as internationally for capital.
Thank you. What do you think are the major pitfalls if you want to found a business? Can you name 3, for example, Professor Hackenberger?
I think the biggest challenge, I mean, Craig wonderfully summarized the 3 essentials. And when you think now about these essentials, you can pretty much also directly come to the pitfalls. I think ideas are, of course, important. Without an idea that has potential, we don't have to talk about this. But I think also this aspect about people and idea is very important. So our observation was that as academics, we in a lot of cases want to control the whole project. But at one point, if you want to do this, you also have to let it go. So in other words, the team that is then running the company may have other interests or may have also other possibilities. They have to talk with people. And we, at one point, as somebody who came up with the idea in the beginning, we cannot micromanage at all the times. And so, in other words, to really bring this forward, sometimes you really have to work as a whole team and not as an individual. I mean, this is a part of research in the life science anyway, but I think that this is really an important aspect. And then another, if I may add just another small point, as academics, we, of course, also Craig referred to this, we like to generate impact. We like to generate papers. We like to generate like big, nice journal publications. We also have to carefully think about the sustainability and something like patents and all this, and at what time we publish what. And we just have to make this all, fit this all together to really not lose one or the other aspect. And this may be in one of the other cases challenging, and then also determining whether such an endeavor is successful or not.
Professor Kruse, you wanted to add something.
Yes, so this idea of the role of the founder, the faculty founder, is a very important one, and I think really can define success or failure. I spend a fair bit of my time advising my fellow faculty on what their role should be or could be. And I often use a academic study, interestingly enough, done by Harvard Business School about 12 years ago, which looked at the successes and failures in small businesses, particular biotechs. They distilled their findings down to basically something very simple, and that was, as an academic founder, one can either be king or queen, or one could be rich, but you can't be both, right? And so I thought that was very informative, and it has shaped my approach as I interact with these professional business people. It's like, okay, I may know a lot about science and how to run an academic lab, but these are people who do this day in, day out. These are professionals. This is their career. And I take a back seat to their driving these companies. And I think that's really important for academics to remember, because if I try to bring the same type of, as Christian said, controlling approach that I have in my lab to my company, it's more likely not to succeed.
Okay. Before we open up the discussion to the public, which is very much welcome to add their comments, I've got one last question to Professor Tüttenberg. Does it make a difference? You're working in a hospital, not in a university hospital, but not only in the university. Does it make a difference from where you found your business, from a university or from a hospital?
I don't know exactly. From the hospital, it's also kind of there are many regularities or many laws, and I think it's very difficult to join the ideas from. I only can judge the university hospital side. So, but there were many competing ideas when you want to found. It's a spin-off of the University Medical Center, and we can see BioNTech was the same, had the same way. But there are many different ideas how to found a company and what should be the role of the University Medical Center, for example. And I think this is you come from the University Medical Center and you want to treat the patients in an investigative trial, for example. So you want to stay with one foot in the University Medical Center, but on the other hand, you want to go out. And this is a very contradiction. This is very contradictory. So I think it's not that easy. But it's worth to do it because, it's for a medical doctor. I think it's good. It's a good way to have a translational idea and then to go step by step to an own company. Nevertheless, I don't know whether it's more easy if I would be at the university and not at the hospital. I don't know it because I'm in the hospital since 20 years. So,
okay. Well, thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Professor Kruse. Thanks a lot, Professor Tüttenberg. Thanks a lot, Professor Hackenberger. And now it's up to you. We are very curious to learn about your questions and your comments. Please share them with us.
Okay, I'm live.
Welcome again to our session, Starting Up Science from Lab to Therapy. If you want to join the discussion and share your comments, you can either use the live chat function on YouTube, or you go to the webpage Heinrich Wieland Prize 2020.de and just follow the instructions. And while we are waiting for the first questions to pop up, I would be interested in, you've all got a scientific career, you've all got lots of scientific experience, but what did you really have to learn from scratch to become an entrepreneur? Craig Cruz, do you want to start? What was the one thing that you really had to learn, which completely new to you as a scientist? Craig Cruz, can you hear me?
I can. So
Okay.
I would say that the thing that I needed to learn was how to put myself in the position of a business person, how to look at science from a business opportunity. What does it take to create value? And I think that's the most important thing when one is going from academia to industry, is this concept of creating value, because that's not something that we as academics are necessarily trained to think about first and foremost.
Would you agree, Professor Hackenberger?
Yes, of course. This, let's call it business point of view for sure. And yeah, I would also add that scientific innovation maybe, or innovation maybe something else from a business point of view. And for me personally, it was writing patents.
Okay. And Professor Tittenberg, what was new for you?
I have to admit, I nearly had to learn everything new. I started, as Craig said, with this business stuff. I haven't never before encountered terms like business plan or cap table or term sheet. I didn't know what is a seed funding or Series A funding, and I had really every day I had new vocabulary to learn. And I also had to learn writing patents and doing contracts and all this legal stuff you need if you have this shareholder agreement things. And yeah, it was everything was new. And I would have liked to have learned this a little bit more earlier during my studies or during the job, that there would be possibilities to not to start from the very beginning at this time point, because yeah.
Okay, we've got a first question from, I've just seen you, Craig. We've got a first question from the audience. How do you foster the entrepreneurial spirit in researchers? For example, in having this as a career option? That comes a bit to what you said, Professor Tittenberg. How do you foster this? With that, do you've got any ideas? Craig Cruz, do you want to answer?
Well, I think that it's there are more opportunities, obviously, for my trainees to go into industry than there are into academia, fortunately or unfortunately. And so as industry and academia work more closely with each other, my trainees now have opportunities to see what life would be like, either in a large pharmaceutical company or in a biotech. And so they can see that transition. They can envision themselves on the other side of that divide, and therefore the divide becomes smaller. And so I really try to encourage these types of interactions between industry and academia, not only because it pushes the science forward, but in my opinion, it helps with the training opportunities that I can offer people in my laboratory.
And is that a specialty of the US, or would you agree that this is the case in Germany as well, Professor Hackenberg and Professor Tittenberg?
If I may add, exposure to the other field, let's say to other entrepreneurs, is really key. And this is something that I observed here in Berlin. I think Berlin is really a city where also My students, they were interacting with a lot of different people who were all involved in startups. I think there you at one point had this funding gene. You wanted to create something on your own. And I think there, yeah, you have to have this nurturing idea in the beginning. So this was key, but also then learning from success stories. I think that was essential.
Okay. And is one question that comes up as well in the audience is, did you at one point come to the point where you thought, oh, should I really invest all my time and energy and experience into a new company instead of just doing my research, what I was educated for? Professor Tittenberg, would you like to answer that question?
I think yeah, I come from two sides. I come from the medical side, and I come from the research side. And I found in the very beginning, to be honest, I didn't want to do research, but then it fitted quite good together. And you learned about that research can be translated into the clinics and vice versa. And then there came the idea to add the business aspect. And I think this was the point, to see that if you add all these things together, and then you can end up with a real medication. And I think this was the point when I thought it's really worth to go this way, and perhaps to leave. Yeah, I left my clinical career at the moment, and I left also my basic research. I have still a little group, but which works with melanoma, a completely other direction. But I think it's worth to do it like that, because then it fits logically together, I think. And this was the point where I thought, okay, it's a good way to go.
Okay, you are also the CEO of your company, and you just had to look for investors. What do you think, what is more attractive for potential investors? Is it safety or is it opportunity? And how do you balance these two things?
To be honest, I didn't catch the question because there was a disturbance in the
Okay. I think the question was, it's gone from my screen as well, but is it more attractive for investors to have the opportunities, or are they more looking for safety? Or is that perhaps a thing between the US and Germany? So might German investors be more safety seeking and American investors more venturesome? Is that the case?
Sorry, it was I didn't catch it because there was so much disturb. Do you just have to repeat it? Answer?
How do you find investors? What do the investors need to be?
Okay. So now I got it. Sorry for that. We found investors. Yeah, I think if you want to find investors, it's good. In the university, you have a technology transfer department. You can go there and have some contacts or some networking aspects. But we went to many pitch days, so to present our company to be founded, and to present our ideas, and to do networking, and to come back with a lot of new business cards, and then you have to go on and make contacts, and I think this is the best way to find investors.
Would you agree, Professor Cruz? How do you find investors, and what are the investors seeking? Are they safety seeking, or are they more looking for opportunities that might be in your company?
I think by definition, the venture world is seeking risk. They have a business model in which they place many bets on companies that are likely not to work, with the hope that the few that do work will succeed so well that overall they will be making their investors money. And so I think that at least in the US, that they are looking for risk. And so that's a good thing for if you have a new idea. But you also need to have a balance in that investors need to be patient. Sometimes the science doesn't work as quickly as we like. And so finding the right investors, the right match between the founders and the science and the investors' level of risk is a key part to the future success of a company.
Okay. And if you had to give an advice to someone in science who wants to become an entrepreneur, would you say it's better to just pursue a further education like an MBA, for example, or just find business partners?
I would say that it's important to get real world experience. And that could be as simple as still working at the bench as a scientist. If you can join a company at a very early stage, there are many learning opportunities that present themselves in terms of how the company engages investors, how it goes out and actually builds a platform. And so I feel that, in my opinion, that the greatest education would be having those real world experiences. If you want to go into the business side as opposed to the scientific leadership side, then of course, those additional educational opportunities will be important.
Would you agree, Professor Hackenberger?
Yes, of course. I mean, in order to drive this forward, you have to have at one point experience beyond the science that you are doing in order to also establish the company. There are a lot of legal aspects that you have to consider. Also, in order to write a business plan, in order to be successful when you seek out for money here, for example, in Germany with some of these programs. But also coming back to your other question, what I want to add is my observation in Germany was when we were seeking for the investors, it was a whole package that was important. Maybe not as much the risk aspect that Craig was putting emphasis on. Of course, that was also important. Is there really some kind of like additional impact generated, which is much higher than what was before? But also, how reliable was that? How is the team composed? Who's still benefiting? Who's contributing? All these aspects. So we actually experience that investors are looking pretty carefully there. What is there, and how this can be further developed. But I should also say that in our case, as I mentioned before, we had already a phase that was funded by Exist. So in other words, the investors could also look into something where this all developed and how this developed and so on.
Okay. Is there a few questions coming up regarding the how do I become a science entrepreneur? Do you think it would be a good idea to teach that in uni, or is that being taught in uni? How does the scientist become a businessman as well, or did you have to learn that for yourself, Professor Tüttenberg?
Yeah, there should be the possibility to have perhaps not kind of studies, but perhaps meeting or networking events or something like that, that young people who do want to go there, it's something Greg said already, who do want to go there can join other people, perhaps more experienced people on the one hand, but also people who have the same idea, and just to exchange opinions and ideas. And I think this is the best way. But also, I would like to have this more addressed also in the studies. I think there could be a kind of biotech course, something like that, which tells you what is possible, what could you do with the ideas. Because I think if you learn that there are possibilities not only to be a medical doctor or not only to be a researcher, but a combination of both, and even go further, this would be great. We have this kind of, there are now kind of medical scientists, for example, who try to combine already this medical and scientific stuff. And now there should be the third component to be an entrepreneur, something like that.
Professor Hackenberger, you wanted to add, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think it would be very helpful for the young people if they have a little bit guidance, but not too much. I think this would be quite a good.
Okay, Professor Hackenberger, you wanted to add something.
Well, I think one has to separate from people bringing forward to the idea, because if you are a scientist doing your PhD and you have the vague idea of becoming an entrepreneur, there I think you need role models, you need to have access to people that were successful and that are able to share their ideas. And there I think what is also important is that maybe not only the superstars like Craig is there, but also the people that really run the company. So for example, in my case, the CEO, Dominic Schumacher, that did this all, or Jonas Smith-Helmer, who brought the company towards the current situation, who would be then answering the questions on how to do it. So, but then of course, afterwards, then having these course programs that Professor Tüttenberg mentioned would be also great in order to help them having the repertoire and all the tools in order to drive this forward. So
Okay.
It's, in my opinion, a little bit two-faced, but we have also great programs for doctoral programs, graduate schools, and I think this can be easily implemented there.
Okay, there's another question. I'm just reading it out because it's a question from someone, I don't know who. He says, or she says, I have education in neuroscience and I need to combine it with medicine. What is the best way to then use it in the business sphere? What would you recommend? I'm not quite sure what exactly this person wants to ask. But I think
in terms of getting an idea to be fit for the market, I'm also not getting the question.
Yes, I think I could imagine that is the part. So what is exactly what you need to, if you just come from one scientific background and for your product you would need another one, what would be the best way to just achieve that? That will be my interpretation of that question.
I mean, there are programs everywhere where are meeting rooms where there are people available that you can talk from other disciplines to explain your project, and then talk to the other person from another discipline, and maybe there's a mutual interest and where maybe some of your problems can be addressed, and all of a sudden something new can come up. Maybe during the Falling Walls conference, there are these brain dates. Maybe sign up for one of those and you find your solution.
Okay, that's a good advice. There's another question. It might be a difficult one. I've asked it, and whoever knows exactly the number can be very welcome to answer. What is the percentage of professors in each of your departments that have started companies before? Do you know that, Professor Cruz? Roughly? Or Professor Hackenberg?
I would say maybe 15% of my faculty.
That's quite a lot, isn't it? It sounds a lot.
It's less than a handful. I have a small faculty.
Okay. How about you, Professor Hackenberger and Professor Tüttenberg? Do you know that number?
Lower. That's all I can say. I mean, I know some people that did it and that are involved in it, but I would say 5-10%.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think we have one, not from our faculty, but from our university, clinical university hospital. It's the founder of the BioNTech. So this is the one which is for us kind of the leader, and you could follow a little bit his way, but there are not so much more people having founded a company or being entrepreneur.
But I should say I was really specifically referring to people that are still involved, right? So that are still, in the process, not necessarily where they generate some knowledge which is then taken up. Then the number will of course be higher. Yeah. But
But involved, we also don't have so many. I think 5%.
Okay. Apparently, we've got lots of interesting questions around the topic, how do I become a businessman or a businesswoman? And one question is, do you think there are special personal qualities one needs more in science than in entrepreneurship and the other way around? Or are there personality qualities that you do need in both, as the three of you probably have?
I think that in business, there's a greater emphasis and need for teamwork. And so this balance between, an ego-driven follow me versus a consensus, what should we be doing collectively, leans more towards the collective, whereas we are rewarded in academia for the former.
Okay, good. I've got John, just one more question that came up in the first part of our discussion. That was that you, Professor Cruz, and Professor Hackenberger, you kind of gave away your baby, your companies, your ideas. As on the other side, Professor Tittenberg, she is still the CEO of her company. So she didn't give away her baby. And Professor Tittenberg, what do you think are the advantages of still being in control, of still being the head of your company?
I think we are in a very early phase, and we are just in this transition phase from this research lab into the company. And I think our main focus at the moment is still research and developing our product in the right way and developing it for other indications. And I think I believe as long as we are on this focus research, I think I can be a good CEO. I think if we go to the next step, where the focus is to make money and to enter the market, I think perhaps there is also then the time point to leave the position and to give it to someone who has an expertise in this part of the daily business. But at the moment, I think being in this transition phase and being with a focus on research and development, it's okay to don't give away it at this moment.
Okay, and I've got one more question to Professor Cruz. Did you have in your career that one moment where you thought, okay, forget about it, I'll stop this, I'll go back to my uni and I'll stay there and I'm not going to touch anything that's got something to do with the company? And if you had that moment, what took you out of that moment? So what made you think, okay, yes, I am going to be a businessman?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the concept of a pivot, where you start a company with one vision, one goal, one direction, and after working on it, you have the reality sets in and things don't work as originally planned. The company needs to pivot to a new direction. And every single company I've been involved with, pivots, and it can be challenging, it can be difficult. But I think that what helps me when these things happen is that I have been fortunate to have investors who are patient, who understand that the science is not linear, it sort of zigzags. And the way they describe it to me is that they would rather invest in an A team with a B idea than a B team with an A idea. And so they feel that they have assembled, in each of my cases, we've assembled a great group of people. If our original idea didn't work out, we'll find a new one.
Okay. Professor Hackenberger, did you have such a moment where you thought, okay, forget about it, I'll stick to my science?
Not really, because I strongly believe in team playing all along, and we were always a team when we founded this. So it was never that it was my only idea. We were 4 people in the very beginning, and it became clear that it was something that we all do together. And so everybody had to play a part, and so therefore it was not really a question to give this up, unless at one point the money runs out. But since the concept and the data and everything works well, and we got then more and more funding, then it worked well. And I should say also from what Professor Tüttenberg said before, when I thought about also being more involved in the company or not, I'm still a scientist. I have also other ideas in other areas, and this whole concept of our company is one part of our research line. And so therefore it was something where it was a dream when I had this team assembled where we could really drive something forward based on some technology that we developed in our lab, and there we are. So it really fit well in together.
Okay, we've got one more question regarding the corona crisis. How has that health crisis impacted your individual companies? I mean, all your companies are in the health sector. So was there a decrease in investments, or was there even a surge due to the general increased interest in biological or biomedical research? Who of you wants to answer that question?
So I can maybe briefly address this, because we had our Series A funding just literally a couple of days, weeks before the shutdown, the first shutdown in Germany in February, March. I was a little bit concerned, but it was not the case. But I should say we are also not working on preventing viral infections in our system. So it was not part of either a big hype or so. It was really something that was developed before, and all our investors stick to this and said, this is an idea that we want to fund, and just let's run this through. And so, yeah. And with this company, I'm not sure that we will go into developing something against viral infections. We'll see.
How about you, Professor Kroes or Professor Tüttenberg? Were you
Well,
affected by the corona crisis?
I would say that just operationally, there have been some challenges. Deliveries have been challenging, especially from overseas. And of course, just maintaining the health of our workers, which is paramount, have put in some just limitations to what we're able to do now versus what we're able to do pre-COVID. But that being said, I've been impressed with how much we have been able to achieve despite these limitations.
Okay.
If I may add, we had one small challenge, but it's more or less a joke. So during our Series A funding, we had a long appointment with the lawyers, and there all the documents had to be read out, and it was over, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 hours. And we were hoping that at one point we would get something to drink or to eat or whatever, which they promised before. But then at one point they said, because of the corona, you're not getting anything. This was one of the bigger challenges during this crisis.
Okay. Professor Tüttenberg, yes.
Yeah, what I found most challenging was we had just identified before the shutdown started our investors, our lead investor, and I like it very much to kind of perform or present our company idea in the real life and not in these video sessions, because I think the atmosphere, the ambience, and also the investors can get to know our team is much more easier if you are really in front of each other. And so with all the we have a team of 4 investors, or a group of 4 investors, and I haven't met them personally, and that was a real challenge, because I think I like performing in a live situation much more, and I like to persuade the people by presenting my ideas, and this was really challenging. And sometimes when they had questions, or when they were not so sure if they want to invest or not, said, oh, it would have been much more easier to go there and to present and to be alive there, and to have my team with me. And yeah, for me, it was challenging. But now we have our investors, so everything is fine. We persuaded them to do this video conferences, but yeah.
Okay, we've got one last question from the audience. Does it make sense to get involved into politics as an entrepreneur to boost the support of biotech? What do you think? It's a difficult question, I know.
Yeah. For us to go into politics?
Yes, for example, or for someone who wants to found a business.
Well, let's see if I want to become a politician, but of course we have to talk to the politicians. I mean, we have to send strong messages from our community, which I also tried during this conversation, that We are on a good way, but we should not stop here in Germany. We need more support. We need also to critically think about how to acquire more risk capital and how we can really encourage this, maybe from the politicians. So, and this is something that, of course, I would like to be actively involved in the near future. And of course, I'm doing this already wherever I meet politicians. But yeah, this is, I think, something that has to be very strong also from our community. We have to reach out too.
What do you think, Professor Kroes? Is there a huge gap between politics and biotech and stuff like that?
There could be, but I'm not sure that's necessarily the role for faculty entrepreneurs. I would say that might be best done by the professional CEOs that are, for example, when a company goes public. I will say that I've had a fair bit of interaction on the local level, creating jobs, real estate, incubator space. And so these are things that where the entrepreneurial interests from faculty kind of overlap with some of the issues that are ongoing in the local biosector. And so that's where I've been focusing most of my political outreach, if you will.
Okay, we are nearly at the end of our session. Just one last question, and please be very short in your answer. I start with you, Professor Kroes. What would be your main advice for a young founder?
I would say that you should believe in yourself. You need to advocate for yourself. There are going to be many people that are going to tell you no, but you just have to remain true and persevere.
Okay, Professor Hackenberger, what is your main advice?
Do it. If you have the idea.
That was very short. Thank you. Professor Tüttenberg, what is your main advice?
Yeah, be risky, be creative, and yeah, have the courage to do it, because it's yeah, a tremendous or a good experience. And yeah, I agree to Professor. Just do it. Just start.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Kroes, Professor Hackenberger, Professor Tüttenberg, and thank you for all your comments and the interest in our session. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.